Sound check 1 2 3. Sound check 1 2 3.
Good morning. Welcome to Governance Review Subcommittee. As we have quorum present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. In the room is Councillor Cameron Crutch, and online is Councillor Brad Clark. So please remember that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Members of committee, please note that we are using a new process for joining the speakers list. If you are attending in chambers and wish to speak, please press the blue request button on the screen in front of you. Cameron, you know how to do this, right? I feel like we're okay. And then Councillor Clark, you know how to do the WebEx thing, right? Oh, but Councillor Nan is also here. And I'm pretty sure Councillor Nan also kind of knows how to use the WebEx thingy to ask to be on the speakers list and everything. So I think I'm just going to skip to all of that and get right onto it. So may I have, we're moving on to approval of the agenda. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve this agenda as presented, please? Councillor Crutch, Councillor Nan. Any amendments to this agenda from the committee members? Okay, seeing none, may I have a show of hands vote, please? Looks like that's everyone. Motion is carried. Let's move on to declarations of interest. Members of committee, are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Approval of minutes from the previous meeting. This is from November 25th, 2024. May I please have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the November 25th, 2024 meeting, please? Councillor Crutch and Councillor Clark. Okay. Any discussion on the adoption of these minutes? Seeing none, this is a show of hands vote, so may I have your vote, please? Looks like everyone. That carries. Thank you. We are now moving on to items for consideration. This is FCS 26019. This is the 2025 review of the city's procedural bylaw. And so I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to at least approve the recommendations and put it on the floor. So a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Clark and Councillor Nan. Questions to staff. Councillor Clark first, please. I saw Councillor Clark first, so we're going to go to him.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions on Appendix A. I'm looking right now at 5.2, the appointment of chairs and vice chairs. This particular section says that the mayor shall appoint the chair and vice chairs for each relevant committee. That should be changed to may appoint. Any mayor that's in that position may appoint, but they're not required to appoint. It's supposed to be discretionary. So I'd like to hear from staff as to why it says shall.
Okay. I have Clerk Trenum in the room with me. Clerk Trenum, please.
Through you, Chair. Actually, that's correct, Councillor. We should change that to May. We'll make that adjustment and have that as revised for this when it returns to AFNA as a note. So the bylaw will reflect that change.
Thank you. The next question is on, 5.12.19. So we've had this discussion a few times in my time on council. How do you restrict anyone who is in litigation from not coming to speak to a committee or council? Council does not have to debate. Council does not have to question. Council does not have to put themselves in any risk. But denying that opportunity to anyone who wants to come before a committee or a GIC troubles me. Can I have someone speak to that?
All right, Clerk Trenum, please.
Through you, Chair. I'm sorry. Could you just clarify the appendix and the point again?
Yep, we're still in Appendix A to the report. It's 5.12, subsection 19. Any person, group of persons, or organization wishing to address a committee with respect to private and confidential pending legal action, OLT matters shall not be permitted to delegate.
So this has been pretty standard language that we've seen across other procedural bylaws, through you, Chair. To your point, it is not the easiest thing to manage or maintain. Through some initial discussions with other clerks and how things function, it's always been the recommendation. We can certainly take that back and speak with our internal legal counterparts to see if there's better wording for that, or maybe if it needs to be removed all the way. I leave it to council or this committee if there's any desire to keep it or modify that in any way, though.
Yeah, I'm going to oppose it. So if we can sever that out. I've always had that problem. I think it is a mistake whenever we try to restrict someone's freedom of expression. If they want to appear before a body that they are in litigation with, whether or not it's planning or otherwise, um, that's their right. We don't have to entertain the debate or begin asking questions. We're in that position when we're in litigation. Our sole purpose is to listen to what's being said. Then we can have a conversation with legal if they're bringing up information that we feel uncomfortable with. To deny people that right is problematic for me.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Clark?
Yes, item 5.14, correspondence in relation to matters beyond the jurisdiction of the municipality shall not be included in council's weekly correspondence listing. I'm trying hard to parse that. And on my note here says example.
That's a good.
Why would we do that?
Okay. Clerk Turnham, please.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, it's the same language from delegation, so it's making this mimic what happens with the delegation section. The reason being, if, for example, somebody, and we do get this, somebody will submit something that is actually a provincial matter and it should be redirected to the province, but it comes here instead. Again, this is different than asking the city to write a letter endorsing something, but this is, say, asking, I would like you to change this. Well, if it's not in your jurisdiction to change it, we wouldn't put it before the body. So it's similar to a delegation in that respect, but just making them equal, both delegations and correspondence when they were separated out in the previous amendment of the procedural bylaw.
I understand. But the language as it is written currently would capture all correspondence in matters beyond jurisdiction. So correspondence from the province or the feds, we're not going to see those anymore?
So through you, Chair, no, you would still see those because that's correspondence written to the municipality about something that the province is educating or providing information to the municipality. So that would be a little bit different. This is requests or correspondence to a matter that is outside the overall jurisdiction.
So
Examples we have of this, if it is reasonable, Chair. For example, I want the municipality to change how the funding of the police through a budget process. So I want you to delete this particular section of the legislation. That's not within the municipality to amend that legislation. That's a provincial matter. We would file it and we would advise them to circulate this to their minister and so on and so forth.
So let me offer some examples and you tell me whether or not we'd be seeing that correspondence. The provinces indicated that they're pursuing the amalgamation of 36 conservation authorities down to 7. That's outside the jurisdiction of the municipality, but we're not going to receive letters from people stating their position or asking the city to advocate for a position? Because that's what this does.
I would suggest otherwise, Chair, that there's a difference between somebody asking for the municipality to support a resolution or to pass a resolution asking the province to do something that's within the ability of the municipality. The municipality can write a letter asking the province, we're a body of the province in that case, to perhaps do something versus strictly correspondence that is asking us to do something ourselves that is not within our jurisdiction.
Again, Chair, I would suggest that the language is not consistent with the intent. So I have concerns about that item also. Item 5.16, declarations of interest. All declarations of interest are to be declared in open session. So we are still maintaining the procedure that if a elected member, while in closed session, realizes at some point that they have either a non-disqualifying or disqualifying conflict of interest, they are to raise it in camera and then come out and raise it again in open session. Correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. The last one that I have is 5.8.3. Committee recommendations in council. This is speaking to the Public Health Subcommittee. Says a minimum of 2 days shall pass before the minutes of the board is presented to the Board of Health to provide adequate opportunity to review. Every effort will be made for Public Health Subcommittee members to be released at an earlier date. So is this just trying to put the Public Health Subcommittee in the same box as I'm struggling with this, so could you help me through this?
So through you, Chair, if you just scroll up a little bit to the previous page, section D, those are sections that are being deleted. So if you look in a future appendix, you'll see that section's actually crossed out. It's being removed because we no longer have the Public Health Subcommittee.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The first one, I suggested that we're changing it to May, so we need to amend that, Chair. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then I want to be opposed to 5.12.19 and 5.15 or 5.14.15.
5.14.
0.15. Correspondence out beyond the jurisdiction of the municipality shall not be included in the correspondence listing.
Yes, okay. I have both of those pulled out, but let's move on to the actual amendment currently. So you're asking for an amendment to change 5.8, was it?
5.2
5.2?
from
Sub one.
shall appoint to may appoint.
Correct. Okay. Is that housekeeping or is that an actual amendment?
We'll just treat that as a friendly. We'll just adjust it.
Okay.
We'll make
so
sure that that's
housekeeping.
corrected. Yeah.
Okay, so we won't, so Clerk, you're okay with, sorry. Counselor Clark, you're okay with that?
It's unusual. Normally we have to move a motion to amend it.
It would be considered an amendment, Chair, just a friendly amendment if the rest of the committee members are okay with that. Overall, it should have been in there as may, it just went in as shall. But well, if we're comfortable treating it as just a friendly amendment, it'll be friendly in the minutes and it'll display that it's a change.
Okay.
I'll leave that to the chair. I can't see everybody.
Okay. I think everyone's okay with it. That sounds good. Everyone is okay with that being a friendly amendment. So we'll move forward with that. On
Thank
my
you.
speakers list now is Counselor Crutch, followed by Counselor Nan. Counselor Crutch, please hold on. Give me.
I had some similar questions about things that Councillor Clark did and then some other things. I'll start with the other things first. So I noticed in appendices A, B, C, and D, we talk about different things related to advisory committees and councillors, advisory committees and citizen committee reports. Is this because of the shift to community liaison groups? Is that why we're doing this? Because I do think that one of the issues we will run into with this change to the bylaw is that suddenly, for those of us who are on an advisory committee, like the Climate Change Advisory Committee, will be required to vote. And I think that the purpose of us being there is to advise, not to vote. So how are we going to reconcile that issue?
Through you, Chair, sorry, could you just direct me to the section again?
Yep, it's all in the appendices A, B, C, and D. There's also appendix E. I think it's also in 6.219. Let me just check. Something else. Just one moment here. Yeah, 6.219.
6.219? Okay.
That's also part of it. That's where it said members of council who are appointed as representatives of an advisory committee do not have voting rights while attending an advisory committee meeting. It's struck out. So the implication is that we would vote. And so that just makes things kind of complicated. I mean, there are many complicated things with the current situation for councillors on advisory committees, to be fair, but this just makes it a little more complicated.
So through you, Chair, by removing that particular section, it doesn't restrict it. So every terms of reference for an advisory committee as created could address whether or not a councillor is a voting member. But I would assume and suggest that by default, if a councillor is sitting on an advisory committee, they should have a vote as a member of the committee.
Okay. Yeah, I struggle with this just generally because from my perspective, there are different kinds, and this is something that's not addressed in the bylaw. I think it should be, but perhaps in the next round of changes. Right now, there are different roles for councillors. The councillor is a member, so a member of council or a member of a standing committee, member of a budget committee. That's fine. I mean, you're a member, you have voting rights, and just like everybody else. And then there's situations where we're appointed as liaisons or appointees, whatever the term may be, right? So if I'm appointed to, for instance, the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion as an appointee, I'm there appointed on behalf of City Council. But again, my role is primarily there to give advice, and I'm there to perhaps bring issues if there are issues back. But my role should not be to affect the outcome of that organization. Specifically, that's a good example because we have no real jurisdiction over that organization and have no rights to do it. And the organization sets the tone of what happens there. But there's this problem, I think, where, for instance, we're on an advisory committee. Again, the job is there to give advice and to be there in an advisory capacity, not really to shape the outcome of the committee. It would be absurd to me that a councillor, and there's 3 of us on the Climate Change Advisory Committee, would then change the outcome of something the committee is trying to do. Like, that seems inappropriate to me. So that's the problem I have with all of this, is that we shouldn't count for quorum. We shouldn't count for anything. We should be there in a capacity as an appointee or a liaison. We're there to attend, or we're there to observe, and that's it. And if they have assistance or want something for us to do or take some other action, we can take that at the committee it reports up to or at council. But I worry about all this situation. For instance, what if councillors have a conflict and can't make it to the Climate Change Advisory Committee? Suddenly the committee can't run now because a couple of councillors count for quorum. Again, we shouldn't be impacting the outcome of this committee in any way. So how do we change that or make a change in the bylaw about that?
So we were recommending the removal of this particular section, Chair, and through you to the councillor, just to leave that open. Hamilton is unique in its procedural bylaw that I've seen where any member of council on an advisory committee is not a full member with the voting rights. If the desire is to keep that uniqueness and prevent councillors from doing that, then we can amend this motion to put that back in or leave it in the bylaw. I have no concerns with that. This was really just an overall cleanup to address some of that. Now, I'll have a review again. Originally we were looking at removing some of the advisory committee language because of the change to CLGs. Upon reflection, we put a lot of that back in because we don't want to prevent that from future happening, as well as some that could continue. Despite the current CLG, there's nothing to prevent council from in the future creating an advisory committee. So that language will stay in there. This one, again, was part of an overall cleanup, but removing it is in line with what I've seen in most municipalities. I have no concerns if committee wants to leave it in.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is even the right space for it. Like, I don't think this is even the right place under voting procedures to address the issue I'm trying to raise. So I'm saying that when you cross this out, it raised an issue for me that was minor in terms of 6.19. But then I started looking through the rest of it. And for instance, you removed the idea of a citizen committee report is kind of being removed from here, right? So there's that vehicle or that mechanism that advisory committees have to give a report, but in appendices A, B, C, and D, that's now been stricken out. So I'm just realizing this presents a number of issues for advisory committees. So maybe it's a matter of you and I could have a chat offline about this and maybe bring forward an amendment to council or something, because my concern is that, or whenever this comes through the process, maybe to AFNA, the reason I say all this because for me, it's not about voting rights or council participation. It's about councillors impacting what these committees are doing in a way that's inappropriate. So if there's ever a tie vote and a councillor breaks it, or for instance, if councillors don't appear at the committee for some reason and there's a quorum issue, and then of course a councillor not being there means the committee meeting can't happen because for quorum, because at the Climate Change for Advisory Committee, we count for quorum. We do, and whether we should or shouldn't is kind of irrelevant, but these are the mixture of problems we have.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, for advisory committees, councillors do not count for quorum unless they're there. So so if you're not present, you don't count for quorum. If you are present, you do count for quorum, if that helps.
In practice, that hasn't seemed to be the case. So that's why I think maybe there's a need to have a more absolute outcome.
Thank you, Chair. So through you to the councillor. So with the report, and we can have a discussion offline, we do address the citizen report issue in a memo that we brought to AFNA, I believe, last week, where as part of the overall shift to this idea of a community liaison group, we're looking at creating more options for people to be able to write these reports, to get information to council, to committee through a written way, making that available similar to a written delegation, but in this template format. So some of these changes really are aimed at just sort of cleaning up the bylaw, not restricting it to this, but leaving it open for us to be able to put that information on the appropriate agenda or what have you, with that shift from the advisory committee to community liaison group. I believe that removing, and agreed with it, removing that one section you referred to, the saying that councillors do not have voting rights, would leave it open to each advisory committee created by council to, within its mandate, determine what that's going to look like. So again, I'm comfortable with it staying in if that's the will of committee and council. But overall, the changes were just more reflecting some of those similar changes with the CLGs. But again, I can meet with the councillor outside of this to discuss that if there are further questions.
Yeah, I think it just has broader implications for how this all works. So I just want to maybe chat with you about that. A couple other points for me here. So to Councillor Clark's points about private and confidential matters, how that all plays out. I think one of the issues I have that's similar to what Councillor Clark is saying, but different, is our preoccupations ought not be the preoccupations of delegates, meaning, let's just say, for instance, we're preoccupied with getting legal advice about a private and confidential matter from our staff, right? Then by nature, just because someone asks for legal advice, it suddenly becomes a private and confidential matter. But the matter itself may not be private and confidential, generally speaking. Outside of getting legal advice, in which case, if somebody wants to come delegate about it, let them delegate about it. Someone wants to come and delegate about the Red Hill Valley Parkway, but then now it's been in a closed session because we want legal advice about it. They just have the right to come and delegate about the Red Hill Valley Parkway. I think we could word this differently to solve everyone's problems. To solve Councillor Clark's problem, to solve the wrinkle I'm suggesting, it might be about, not about saying private and confidential, but maybe referring to the act specifically. Like, are there specific things that people can't come here and talk about that we have in our bylaw, and those lists maybe human resources or sort of like personnel matters, right? That may be something that people can't talk about. People can't talk about whatever else it might be, ongoing negotiations and labor negotiations. I don't know what the list is, but things that people ought not to be able to come and talk in public about. Maybe there's a list that makes sense there. Or just phrasing this in a different way so that it covers, because right now we have like kind of pending legal action, Ontario Land Tribunal, et cetera. I think that just leaves it open if there's a narrow group of things that we don't want people coming to delegate about, and we know what those narrow group of things are, we could just make a list. And then it's there, it's really clear for people what the issue is. I think that's better if we can do that than leaving it as, like I said, the vagueness creates issues.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, we already have the separate vote on it, whether it's passed or defeated today. I can discuss with you or assist in an amendment coming forward, maybe to AFNA. If you're looking at some other potential wording that you could bring into it, we can look at that.
Yeah, maybe Councillor Clark and I can do that offline. I'll look at Councillor Clark and I see a nodding head. We can try and work with you on that. Maybe just have a quick meeting to talk about this stuff. Because I think there's nothing wrong with what you're suggesting. I think it's just the way the language is right now. It makes it confusing for both chairs and the public about what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to adjudicate this? And possibly puts us in a weird spot. On that point, my last point is about order. So there's a bunch of stuff in the bylaw here that's been introduced about order, decorum, but there's no definition of order here in the bylaw. And I know that maybe it sounds kind of easy, right? Like what is order? We all know what order is as councillors, no big deal. But some guidance I think would be helpful for the public and for chairs to know what that means. So what does it mean to maintain order? Does it just mean listen to the chair as instructions? Is it arbitrary? And I sadly know the rules of order too well, but so we're not going to talk about all the rules of order, but there's generally a principle at work here, right? The principle I think is that when you've asked someone not to do something, right, that's in line with the procedural bylaw and they can change it due to them, they're not maintaining order, whatever the little sentence is that we need, I think there needs to be a sentence somewhere in maybe the definitions area that just says what order is, so that you can actually, as chair, go read out the section from the bylaw that says order is X, right? You're not maintaining order. This just gives us a tool, and it's public, it's transparent, people know in advance, and we can tell them. So no one's coming here and no one's trying to make that stuff up on the fly. As someone who's been in meetings that have become disorderly, I think it would be helpful to have a little bit more information. So I'm just saying that just maybe some more context, because I don't disagree with what you're suggesting here in terms of the change, but I do think we're missing a little bit of basic language here to guide us to make sure that we are being fair to people. Because I think it could become arbitrary, because technically speaking, all rules of order are at the whim of the chair and the committee. You could literally do whatever you wanted in the chair, and if the committee didn't challenge you from doing so, you could do it. So I think that might help people or limit their enthusiasm, where they become enthusiastic, and we can also follow up with you about that. So I'm not suggesting an amendment today. These are just my comments, and I'll follow up with you offline before AFNA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Up now is Councillor Nan, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Appreciating both Councillor Clark and Councillor Crutch's comments on the delegation and I guess the correspondences as well. My comment was going to be, instead of being in a position where we vote against it, perhaps finding wording that would satisfy committee members and make them feel confident in the clarity that's being presented there. I think part of my vantage point on this is giving our delegates real clarity around what they can and cannot delegate on. And our procedural bylaw has been getting clearer and clearer, and I think that's helpful for our delegates and residents who want to come to speak to us. But I think that is worthy of fleshing out a little bit more, so that residents are aware of that instead of just waiting for a ruling from the clerk on their delegation. So glad to see that there may be some offline work that can happen before it's approved at AFNA. And then secondly, appreciating the point of order and point of privilege amendment. So if I could, through you, just get clarity from the clerk. The way that this is written now, it eliminates the back and forth that happens or has happened historically in committees where, let's say, a member of committee raises a point of order, the chair recognizes the point of order or point of privilege, that member then speaks to it. And then in the past, we've had a bit of back and forth. The table is live, or has become live or remained live, partly because microphones are on. That's also been handled now, which is helpful. But if I could get clarity, so I raise a point of order, point of privilege, the chair makes an immediate ruling on that point of privilege and point of order. All proceedings of the committee are held in abeyance until the chair makes the according ruling on that, correct?
So through you, Chair, yeah, that's correct. So they can ask, what is your point of order or what is your point of privilege? We listen to the individual. The chair then makes a ruling to either address what has just been raised or to end it and then continue with the proceedings where they were interrupted.
Perfect. Appreciate those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. Up now is Councillor Clark, please.
Sorry, I forgot to push the button. So to Councillor Nan's point, can I just get clarification? So if a member calls a point of order, can another councillor speak to that point of order? They may not agree with the point of order. So is there deliberation on a potential point of order before the chair makes the decision?
So through you, Chair, no, not necessarily. The person raises a point of order. Point of order means we are no longer following procedures in some way. The chair then assesses, perhaps in a quick conversation with the individual clerking the meeting, if they need some assistance, to come to a ruling and determine you are correct, we're not following the order, we will now follow whatever has been raised. Or they disagree and we move on. In either scenario, once the chair has ruled, another councillor could then raise, wait, point of order to that. No, I don't believe that's correct. I believe this is correct. It's just a matter of how you then deal with it. The other option is perhaps the chair rules, somebody disagrees, you can always challenge the ruling of the chair in that situation. So perhaps they rule that you're correct, or sorry, the point of order is incorrect. We are following order. Let's move on with proceedings. Somebody else could say, I challenge that ruling. I agree this was out of order for reasons X, Y, and Z, or some other modifier. It all depends on the situation and what's being brought forward, though.
That's intriguing. I'm not used to that. Because there have been times when points of orders have been called that may or may not be a prima facie point of order, and the chair has not yet made a decision, or the chair may not quite understand the point of order. The clerks do not always get it right, and we should afford the opportunity in those rare instances so that another councillor can raise a point of order in terms of their understanding. So are you saying that a point of order is raised, the clerk provides advice and the chair makes the decision, and we're forced to challenge the chair if we disagree with the point of order? We should be avoiding the need to challenge the chair by enabling discussion as to whether or not the point of order is a legitimate and authentic point of order as per the procedural bylaw and the rules of order that we follow.
So through you, Chair, I may not have fully understood the question the way you had phrased it. So let me clarify. Yes, if a individual raises a point of order, the chair is going to provide a ruling. To your point, absolutely. Maybe there's something that's been missed that the chair and even the clerk didn't quite follow what is out of order or what is being raised. Absolutely, once the chair has said, no, that's not a point of order, moving on, another councillor could absolutely, no, that is a point of order. I'm raising a point of order now, and explain it. What I was getting at was we shouldn't be having a full out debate on point of orders necessarily, unless the chair is interested in hearing those opinions. It's up to the chair to determine how to move forward. If the chair would like to receive advice or comment from somebody else, they're welcome to do so. It's their meeting. My point was we don't move on with the meeting until that point of order has been dealt with and they need to issue a ruling. Once they've issued a ruling, at that point, you can either raise a subsequent point of order because it wasn't quite correct or challenge the ruling.
Okay, I understand. Appendix B, 5.12, which is the delegations. So I still am wrestling with a couple of things here. While there is an inherent definition of the term disrespectful, we don't provide latitude. For example, what is disrespectful behavior to some may not be disrespectful behavior to others. objecting to a decision of staff or council and criticizing that decision, is that deemed disrespectful? Because we do have that from time to time. People appear before a committee quite agitated. And I'm just really worried, Chair, that the more we tighten these rules, the less freedom of expression delegates are going to have. The
So through you,
second,
Chair.
go ahead, sorry.
Through you, Chair. So we're not adding or removing. That's language that was already there. I'll just state that first. I'll also point to the fact that the counselor is correct. There really isn't a definition, and I would be hesitant to try and define it. It really is, the procedural bylaw is the rules that this council has approved for itself to govern itself. So in a situation of disrespect, which may be different from one person to another, the chair would make a call and a ruling to which this body has that opportunity to agree or disagree and settle that together through the situation we just described. One might call something disrespectful and say, I'm going to ask you to stop speaking in that tone or in that manner or using those words. The group can, through a point of order, correct that and say, Chair, I don't believe that's correct. We want to hear what this individual is saying. And that speaks to this being an assemblance of tools that the body can use to govern itself. So I do see where the counselor is coming from with this. It's a difficult thing to get right and to put into language. Ultimately, the idea of you can't be disrespectful of another person is inherently included in just about every procedural bylaw that you read. There's nuanced differences in each one as to how they word that, and most of them settle on thou shalt maintain order and decorum, which in itself is never properly defined. So being respectful is the language that sort of we had settled on here at the city, and that's been in the bylaw as long as I'm aware.
So not too long ago, I think it was not last year, the year before, I was chairing a committee. I may have the timing slightly off, but a delegate came forward and was providing commentary, very serious commentary on some very serious topics. She started to mention police officers who had been convicted. I was directed by the clerk to call her to order and tell her not to mention these names. I raised the concern twice as to how we can restrict someone's commentary. And the argument that I was given was it puts the city in a libelous position because we're broadcasting. Well, now, I've not seen that anywhere in common law, and I have looked where a municipality or a government was sued for libel because they allowed someone the freedom of expression to speak on a matter that they have had quite a lot of detail on. So I still don't see that anywhere in here. And so I'm still troubled why there has not been a response to my queries, either from legal or from the clerks, as to the rationale or the legal authority to restrict someone's ability to raise concerns. This particular lady raised several times, and she's pointing out that the police department, in her mind, is not holding police officers accountable. And she highlighted all the different police officers that were being charged or were charged, both of which are public documents. And I was told to cut her off. So do we have any common law that can show me that that is a legitimate reason for a chair to stop someone from speaking in public on an issue?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'll ask Clerk Trenum, please.
So through you, Chair, first, to your point, yes, I was hoping to have a legal opinion to assist with this particular matter today. Unfortunately, we just don't have it yet. I'm hoping to get it, call another meeting of this committee just to give you that feedback on that very specific issue, because it does get into matters of legality that are beyond procedure that I don't want to comment on. So that is being prepared. It is coming your way. With regard, I can't speak to that particular incident. I know that in past decisions have been made or recommendations have been made, if it is with regards to specific staff, to be mindful of the fact that if you have a complaint about a staff person, there are more formal avenues for that than through committee. It should be going into a complaint to the organization or through audit or other avenues. Similarly, if you had a complaint about a member of council, that shouldn't be brought to the committee. It should be brought to the integrity commissioner if it's a code issue. But beyond that, I would rely on the opinion and legal to provide me further advice. But we don't have anything in the procedural bylaw that speaks to you can't mention somebody's name, that you can't identify somebody. What we do advise that in the case of a delegation, if you were delegating on behalf of somebody, we would want you to have obtained the consent of that individual before sharing any information. I believe that's an, I'm sorry, item.
May I have a follow-up, Chair? Or
Yes.
so there have been times where I've been in meetings and the chair has asked the delegate not to refer to a counselor or staff person. Is there any rationale in the bylaw as to why they can't say that they disagree with Councillor Clark's position on this?
Clerk Trenum, please.
So through you, Chair, nothing in the bylaw that would prevent somebody from stating that.
So then we really shouldn't be restricting people from raising individual staff person or manager's names. They may disagree with the decision or the policy that was recommended, drafted by that person. They can't disparage the person, but they can certainly indicate that they don't agree with the decision. Is that not fair game?
Through you, Chair. Similarly, if an author of a report had made a comment and a recommendation, there'd be nothing to say. An individual couldn't say, I disagree with the recommendation made by this author in this report.
Thank you. You can tell, Chair, that I continue to be concerned, and I've expressed these things many times over the years about any restrictions on freedom of expression. They have a constitutional right to speak before us. If they're inciting hatred or violence, then yeah, we should be calling them to order, and we should be controlling it in terms of, yeah, you can't be calling people names, no vulgarities and things like that. But we appear to be, whether intentionally or not, squeezing the box in terms of what delegates can and cannot say. And that continues to concern me. The last question, so do we have any idea when we're going to get that report back with regards to whether or not there is any liability on the city if a chair allows an individual to address other people, whether or not they were charged or not, that type of information? I just have a real problem interrupting someone in the middle of a delegation because they mentioned some individual who has been charged with crimes or has been convicted of crimes. That I don't think that's the role of the chair. I'll leave it at that. I'll wait for the decision to come forward. Thank you.
Did you have a sense or a timeline? That was also part of Councillor Clark's question.
My hope, Chair, was to book a subsequent procedure or a governance review committee once we get through budget, end of February, early March.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Up now is Councillor Crutch, please.
Perhaps it's something we could do to bring these amendments just to AFNA instead of having to, and bring that advice to AFNA instead of having to have another governance review subcommittee meeting, but that's for you to decide. I wanted to speak to what Councillor Clark was saying because I think there's a different problem and it may be a better solution. So again, similar but slightly different, Councillor Clark. Here we are in the battle of the governance nerds or whatever it is we're doing here today, agreeing with each other. I agree with Councillor Clark. I think that that was not the right ruling to be asked to be made when that person was bringing up public information. This is where I think that part that we were talking about earlier might be helpful in terms of how we talk about it. So if a delegate brings something forward here in public, us hearing it doesn't put us in a legal risk. I know people say, well, it's on the public record because a person said it into a microphone in this room. But something being on the public record in and of itself, being brought forward by a delegate, doesn't put the city in any kind of risky position. Only if we act on it, only if we comment on it, only if we, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Especially if someone comes forward and says, by the way, there's this newspaper article, and in the newspaper article it says X. They should be permitted to say whatever they want. Like literally, if it's public information of any kind. I experienced this issue myself when there was public information on the city's website for years, and then I said the thing on the internet, and then the city council got mad and sent me to the integrity commissioner. They were like, this guy said a thing, and then it was like found out later, oh, the thing he said was actually on the city's website the entire time, as he'd said initially. So this is the kind of situation we find ourselves in where, and I find myself in sometimes, where apparently where we're just uttering something that's in the public record. So I think that there's a way to clarify that by saying that introducing, like for instance, if a person comes here who's suing the city and we're getting a litigation update about it, and the literal person suing the city wants to come here and adjudicate this in front of all of us, that's probably inappropriate. They probably shouldn't be here adjudicating the case in front of council for council's commentary. But we could say that. If someone comes forward and introduces something that is discriminatory or violates the human rights code or other kinds of things and says something that's harassing or would be constituting harassment against a member of staff or a member of council, that's also not okay. But for someone to come here and say, I disagree with this ex-staff member or mention a staff member's name just by saying I disagree with them or saying I spoke to someone, right, I think is wild. Of course, Councillor Nam will know this, but when we were at City Housing Hamilton, we ran into a bunch of issues though where it got difficult for us to determine, because we're using the same rules essentially, difficult for us to determine what was appropriate to be saying about staff and what wasn't. So I really think there are some sentences available to us. I don't have them today, but I think in the world there are, where we can put in saying like, this is what is not cool, right? Here's a list of the stuff that's just not okay. And this is how we would say that this constitutes, because again, all things being equal, if somebody wanted to come here and read from an email they sent to staff or that staff sent to them, that's not really private information if it's not actually about a private matter. If it's FOIable, if they're the person who is in correspondence with staff and staff wrote back and said, you can't have a driveway or something, and they wanted to come delegate and say, I disagree with such and such staff who says I can't have a driveway. Usually what had happened, and Councillor Clark knows this, is people will get up in arms about that. Oh no, you said that you disagree with someone who said you can't have a driveway. Like, we just can't be this precious. I think as a group, I think we are too precious, frankly. I think we should be able to have more open debate and discussion with one another and with, and listen to what delegates say instead of worrying about whether it sounds impolite. So that's why, again, I think having a definition for order, and by the way, I sent an email saying that the Borno's Rules of Order edition we used from 1995, I believe that edition has a definition of order in it. Actually, we could just put it in our bylaw, and that might solve the problem right there, then and there. So I think there are a couple things like that will help and clarify for us what they are. And again, I think there's really a small list we all have in our mind, right? The list could be 3 to 7 items that we think we need to have in there. And when someone gets into the item, it's great if it's in the bylaw because we can say, hey, 5 point whatever, it says right here, you can't do this activity. Thanks so much for coming out. So again, it enables the public to have transparency about what they can come speak to, gives clerks a copy paste, right out of the bylaw to send back to someone and gives the chair something if something happens in the moment so we all have confidence. Because I think that's the issue is that everyone chairs a little bit differently. Everyone has different experiences as chair. And if we have the language in there and it's available for people, then it's just going to be, frankly, simpler, easier, and less antagonistic.
Thank you. Seeing as there are no other speakers, we are going to pull out two sections of this right now. So let's start with 5.12. This is the section in Appendix B around delegations. So, sorry. Oh, I see Councillor Crutch, please.
Yeah, I thought if it was okay with Councillor Clark, we were going to try and work on some language, like just pass this, work on some language and bring amendments forward to AFNA rather than try and do that today on the floor. Councillor Clark is giving a thumbs up, so I think we're not, that was the plan, is not to do it. And just to bring some amendments forward.
Clerk Bates, please.
You can still do a separate vote through the chair, one way or the other. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
which is what we're doing right now. It's just a separate vote.
no, I understand. I think
Yeah.
that Councillor Clark and I said we were going to forego that and just deal with it through an amendment at AFNA.
Okay,
Yes.
so,
Councillor Clark
so
is-
no separate vote?
No.
Okay,
Excellent.
sorry.
Makes it awesome. Excellent. So let's, at this time, I already have a mover and a seconder put on the floor. So may I have your vote electronically, please? It's technically the first vote of the day, so. You just need a morning stretch, you know? And stretch. Oh, votes up. Although mine's grayed out for some reason. I'm a yes. I'm not sure why. Yeah, it's not, I'll have to F5 it, but just say yes for me. Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, thank you. And that carries 4-0, thank you. Give me a second. I don't know why I'm on a frozen screen right now. I'm on a frozen screen. So at this time, we are now moving on to motions. Since both of these motions are mine, I'm going to ask Councillor Crutch to take the chair, and then that way he can manage this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Huang. On to motions, item number 9. 9.1, as the development of a formal process to track motions and their respective deliverables referred from Council on December 10th. Councillor Huang is moving it, I'm seconding it, and Councillor Huang, when you're ready, go ahead and.
Thank you. So this motion is really around, has been talked about a lot. Councillor Crutch has talked about this. I think every single councillor has actually talked about this. This in particular was brought forward by Councillor Spadafora, which we moved to this particular subcommittee. So the intention here is to ask clerk and to report back to Audit Finance with the development of a formal process that tracks motions and their respective deliverables, including staff reports for all decision-making bodies to be used by the city manager and relevant directors and general managers, as well as costs associated with implementing such a process. This will come back in Q2 of 2026.
Thank you very much. And we have some speakers on the list here for discussion before we get to the vote. And first up is Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through you. Really glad to see this motion. I feel like it's many years coming, and there's been so many different instances where, we've had to do a lot of administrative cleanup as a result of not having this process in place. I can recall, there was some funds that never got moved into a department division action item, and that subsequently delayed a pretty significant capital project as it relates to Brightside Community Park in Ward 3. It actually didn't exist on an OBL item. And so it took many years to catch back up. We're well on our way in that process now, but definitely needed in the process, and to ensure that we don't have a scenario like that one play out again, where there's lag of sometimes up to multiple years of decisions that have been made in previous iterations of council. So one question I do have for clerks is if this is coming back in the form of a report in Q2 this year, really we're talking about implementing something now going future forward. Is there anything that can be done to clean up at least this past term in terms of the decisions? Thank you.
So through you, Chair, I think we'd want the report to sort of address both. There's the OBL is essentially what we track this with now, and while it quote unquote works in terms of there's a list, transparency of it, and it has a number of inherent issues that we're all aware of. So I'll address it. I just can't speak to what that will look like at this time.
Fair enough. So anticipating that it could have options for consideration and recommendation that speak to both retroactive and going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nan. And up next on our speakers list is Councillor Clark.
Sorry, my mouse doesn't want to work today. Just a couple of questions. And these questions, Vice Chair Kretsch, are just really to make sure that I'm fully aware of the current status of the process. So every so often, we see amendments to the OBL on several committees. So I've always thought, and I may be mistaken, that each standing committee has a document that is an outstanding business list that clerks track. Is that the case?
So through you, Chair, yes, it's a master list that can be separated out by its own committee.
So when you say, sorry, Vice Chair, when the clerk says it's a master list, is it a master list for everything that's an outstanding business item, or there is a master list for each standing committee?
The answer is sort of both, through you, Chair. We utilize eScribe and a task tracker within eScribe. So when an OBL item is created, a new task is created within eScribe that can be assigned to an individual and then added to a list that can be exported. You can reduce it, you can sort it, you can put it in Excel, you can look at it based on committee or by individual.
So, Vice Chair, to my knowledge, I've never seen an outstanding business list, and I may have forgotten them, but being shared with council. Here's the outstanding business list for the Emergency and Community Services Committee, and then councilors can ask any questions on that list. Do we do that on a regular basis, or?
Through you, Chair, it hasn't been the practice, no.
Yeah. So I think that the resolution is good from Chair Wang. I would like to see us consider the publication on a regular basis, the outstanding business list. My rationale for this friendly amendment is to ensure that councillors are aware of what's coming or what has been delayed, other than a motion to extend the timeline 6 months or a year, whatever the case is. It would be nice if we knew on a regular basis, Vice Chair Kretsch, how many items are in the outstanding business list. Because from time to time, and I'm not trying to disparage any councillor around the table, elected members will move a report back without really knowing how much work is underway just from council directed initiatives. So if we could include that in the process, that there'd be regular reports perhaps monthly or quarterly for every standing committee, just so that the public and the councillors know exactly how much work is underway behind the scenes. Is that something that can be included in this, Vice Chair Kretsch?
Yeah, it seems like it's the issue here. I'm just trying to make sure I parse this correctly, understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
So this specific motion is on developing a formal process to track motions and their respective deliverables. Technically, I suppose to some extent, a lot of the things that end up on outstanding business lists are there because they're there by motion, right? So
Yes.
they are. However, there are some items on outstanding business lists that frankly do seem internal, or they seem like they're being added there internally without necessarily having a motion added to them. So there seems to be some gray area here. Part of Councillor Huang's motion is about making this information public as well. So the notion or understanding I have from her motion, and the clerk can correct me if he misunderstands it a different way, is that, I'm just trying to get to your point, Councillor Clark, sorry, it's just a thread here, follow me, that these motions and things that we're tracking, once we develop a process, there'd actually be a public mirror to that. So they'd be on the internet, people could see them, and they'd be able to track the motions and see when they're supposed to be delivered. I presume what you're suggesting is that we say, and ditto to the OBL.
Yeah, I think you've captured it. It's just ensuring that the OBL is transparent, that the public can see it as well as councillors. Right now, if you want to see what the outstanding business list for any of the standing committees, you have to reach out to the clerk to see the document because it's not public.
Right. So what we could do is just change the title of the motion to say, include and outstanding business lists, and then throw that in there if it's friendly to Councillor Huang. Just one moment. The legislative folks are just chatting.
Through you, Chair, I believe it is understood from our part that this is going to look at what do we do going forward, what changes can be implemented, how do we make this transparent and clear and available, as well as what do we do with what we currently have and the backlog, the current OBL, making that both available, transparent, cleaned up, and then connect the two as whatever that transition might look like.
Okay, but it's okay. It's friendly to Councillor Huang. I think she's saying she's fine with putting the language outstanding business lists in there just to make sure we capture it. I don't think that's an arduous thing. That was more of a housekeeping activity. We could just put and where it's applicable and outstanding business lists. If everyone's okay with that and it's friendly, we could do that, Councillor Clark. Does that make sense? Just so it's
Yes.
there.
Yes, I'd be
Okay.
happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, no one seems to be thinking this is an issue of any kind, so we're going to carry on doing it in that manner. There are no other speakers on the list, so we will go to our electronic vote on the subject. I'm in favor. And the vote is up. And that carries 4-0. And now we're on to 9.2, the data minimization principles and policy, moved by Councillor Huang and seconded by myself. Councillor Huang, could you please introduce your motion?
Thank you, Chair. For this motion, just a little backstory as you can read the whereas statements, but the intention here is when we put information on the internet, specifically it could be anything from Committee of Adjustment, it could be anything relating to a potential piece of property. One of the challenges is that we do put a significant amount of information that could be personal information, name plus address. So when this was brought forward by a resident of mine that had some significant concerns about his personal information being put onto the internet for a indeterminate amount of time. And so this was where I asked Clerk Trenum and City Solicitor Shields, what could we do about this? And it turns that there is an opportunity for us to do a bit more of a fulsome examination and scan, and this is essentially asking for the report back. So therefore be it resolved that A, staff in the city clerk's office in consultation with legal services, information technology services, planning and economic development department, and other relevant departments report back to the governance review subcommittee with recommendations respecting data minimization principles and data minimization policy for the city. B, that when developing their recommendations, staff specifically consider and address the following. 1, removing or limiting personal information published on the city's website, particularly in relation to minor variance applications and similar planning processes where the information is not necessary to understand the property-based nature of the application. 2, adopting data minimization practices for online publication, including but not limited to the use of de-indexing measures, avoidance of search engine indexing where appropriate, and other technical or administrative safeguards to reduce the discoverability of personal information. 3, conducting a jurisdictional scan of the Ontario municipalities and other relevant public sector bodies with respect to the handling and online publication of personal information in minor variance applications and other planning or quasi-judicial processes. And 4, developing or confirming a public record redaction procedure, including consideration of 1, the types of personal information that should be redacted prior to online publication, 2, the duration of which personal information is made available online, and 3, processes for removing or limiting access to personal information after statutory or operational needs have been met, and 5, any implementation considerations and resource implications. I think that for me, Chair, just a couple of quick comments. This isn't by no means looking at reducing the amount of information that is available to the public. I do believe that we do have to look at things from a, and this Councillor Clark has said this multiple times, privacy by design, thinking about it holistically and across all of our newer sort of procedures and processes. I did, and for committee's information, I did receive a delegation, a meeting request from several residents that are very interested in this particular topic. And I think that there might be a little bit of a change or a tweak that before we bring this to AFA, because I think that we're missing a key component of potentially asking some members of the community who do use our data for their research purposes. They were a little concerned about some of the wording in this particular motion, but because that meeting happened late Friday, I didn't have enough time to bring it to clerk's attention for today. So I would like to have a little bit of extra time to change a tiny amount of the wording for AFA, for approval at AFA, should this move forward in its current form. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know your intention to do a small amendment at AFNA. And I'll turn now to Councillor Clark.
I think this is great. I really appreciate Chair Wang's initiative on this particular file. The one question, and I'm not sure whether or not it needs to be specifically addressed in the motion, but there are some things that are legislated to be public. For example, a building permit. That's a public document. I believe demolition permits are public documents. I believe heritage permits are public documents. So we need to clarify in the report back if there are areas that we simply can't redact that information without being in non-compliance with provincial legislation. But beyond that, some of these issues,